Dr. Kambon, over to you and your audience.
Thank you very much. So, as mentioned, as Mama Macy mentioned, we're going to try to make it as interactive as possible. And in doing that, whenever I go anywhere, I have a call and response. And for today, our call and response will be, I will say, Emancipation. And I want you to say, Free Black Nation. Can you handle that? Let's try it. Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
That's good. We'll try a little bit more energy. Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
Now, when I do that, that means I don't want you to fall asleep. Because all of a sudden I'm going to burst out with Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
And the person sitting next to you is going to wake you up and say, oh. And we're going to do two responses. Usually I just do one response, but to keep you really on your toes. The first time I say Emancipation, I want you to say
Free Black Nation.
And then the next time I want you to say Free African Nation. Can we try that? Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
So Free African Nation. You will really be on your toes today. You'll be like, which one are we on? Which one? So let's try it. First with black and then with African. Because these are synonyms, right? If you black, you African. If you African, you black. So if you didn't know that, you're going to leave today knowing it because you would have said it 1,000 times. So first black and then African, we're going to switch. Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
Emancipation.
Free African Nation.
Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
Emancipation.
Free African Nation.
Very good. I think we can handle that one. Now, I was asked to give a little bit of background on Emancipation Day. Who here knows anything about Emancipation Day? Anyone? Am I the only one who went online just a couple minutes ago to find out? Well, if we don't know what Emancipation Day is, I'll give you a little background. Now, oftentimes when you hear people who are not black talk about emancipation, they start talking about, oh, that was when we had conscience and we decided our morality wouldn't let us keep beating and killing and doing this to these African people. So we just decided out of the kindness of our hearts to free these black people. But what I want to do is give you a little bit of facts, right? In terms of who really caused the emancipation of African people. And you can see a little bit of that right here. The Africans who emancipated themselves. You can see an image of an African doing what? Emancipating himself. All right? Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
Emancipation.
Free African Nation.
Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
Very good. So let's get straight into it. Now, my background is in linguistics, so anytime I do a talk anywhere, I go into a little bit of the background of what these words are that we use. So we hear, oh, African people were slaves, they were enslaved. What is this slave thing we're talking about? Just a little background, it comes from Slav. These are the Eastern Europeans. When you hear Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, all that Slav, these are the original people who were slaves. So sometimes we will hear the term slave and we think, oh, that's black people. But really, anytime you hear this word slave, you're saying you're in a condition or state similar to these white folks, Eastern Europeans, right? This is not your natural state at all. So if anyone says, oh, your ancestors were slaves, then no, they are not from Czechoslovakia. They may be enslaved Africans, they may be put into a state to be like those Eastern Europeans, but no, my ancestors didn't come from Eastern Europe, right? So a little bit of the background, they said Otto, the so-called great, and his successors, they conducted wars against the Slavs, a great number of whom they took captive and sold into slavery. Then you see the other background where it comes from through the various languages, right? So this isn't us, but we're going to go into the Africans who emancipated. Now, emancipation itself comes from emancipare, so as to come out of a state where you are dependent on someone or underneath someone. Now, emancipation is celebrated in various former British colonies and neo-colonies. I won't go into what that one is. In the Caribbean and areas of the United States, or United States as some of us prefer to say. various dates in the observance of emancipation of enslaved Africans, black people, widely observed in British West Indies during the first week of August, and we'll go into why it's on the first week of August. Emancipation? Aha! Caught you sleeping. Emancipation? Emancipation?
Black nation.
Very good. So also in many Caribbean countries it's part of Carnival, but in Trinidad and Tobago they do it in February or in March, right? We continue. Now you may ask, why is it usually in August? Well, it has to do with this. The Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, you see here. So this was what formally ended slavery in the British Empire, August 28, 1834, with the exceptions of territories in possession of the East India Company, island of Ceylon, and island of St. Helena, and these exceptions were eliminated just a little short of a decade later. Right? Now, I saw a movie called Bell, and in it they talk about this case, the Somerset's case. And this is 1772 Lord Mansfield's judgment in the Somerset's case, emancipating an enslaved person in England. So this was related to the movement to abolish enslavement. The case ruled that slavery was unsupported by law in England, and no authority could be exercised on enslaved entering English or Scottish soil. And this is the movie. And basically, the whole point of the movie is to make you think that Europeans just had a change of heart. They said, oh, let's stop raping and killing and murdering and doing all these evil things we were doing because we have a change of heart, right? But there were other things that were going on around these dates that we don't often hear about, but we're going to hear about it today because emancipation?
Free nation.
Emancipation?
Free African nation.
Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation?
Free African nation.
Very good. So also there was an anti-slavery movement. I want you to remember these dates because there were other things going on apart from the conscience and morality of Europeans. So an anti-slavery movement to abolish enslavement throughout the empire among the British public. 1793, Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada, John Graves Simcoe, signed an act against slavery, passed the local legislative assembly, and it was the first legislation to outlaw the Maafa Maangamizi in part of the British Empire. The Maafa is a Kiswahili term that means great catastrophe or disaster, right? So oftentimes African people, we look for terms in our own languages to describe the things that happen to us. And Maangamizi is even stronger. It means something that was intentionally done to you, not just any catastrophe like a tornado, but here is something that was forcibly done to you. Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation?
Free African nation.
Very good. And then after that, you had something else, Slave Trade Act of 1807. So remember these dates. 1808, Parliament passed finally this act, outlawed the slave trade but not slavery itself, and they started to patrol the coast of West Africa. But you may ask yourself, well, why did they decide to abolish this enslavement? What went on that made them decide to abolish it? Was it due to their morality, or was it due to fear? And you see this here in the background. I'm not sure if you know where this is a depiction of. This is Haiti. So, you know, these pangs in tugging at their heartstrings, it may have been other strings that were being tugged that caused them to get up off of what they were doing. All right? Let's see. Now, in terms of morality, I want to quote noted psychologist, The Psychopathic Racial Personality by Dr. Bobby E. Wright. And he talks about how behavioral scientists generally agree that the outstanding characteristics of the psychopathic, this is someone who is a bit off, right? Psychopathic personality are almost the complete absence of ethical or moral development and almost total disregard for appropriate patterns of behavior. Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation?
Free African nation.
Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation?
Free African nation.
Right, so it says this characteristic has led to a misunderstanding of the psychopath as someone who does not know the difference between right and wrong. This belief is not true. Psychopaths simply ignore the concept of right and wrong. By ignoring this trait in the white race, the lack of ethical and moral development blacks have made and are still making a tragic mistake in basing the worldwide black liberation movement on moral suasion. It is pathological for blacks to keep attempting to use moral suasion on people who have no morality where race is the variable. So we're basically all this is saying we don't think it was morality and considerations of morality that got them to say, you know what, we need to give up this chattel enslavement that we're doing. Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation?
Free African nation.
Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
Emancipation.
Free black nation.
Very good. So what we saw was the restoration of Ma'at. Now for those who may not know what Ma'at is, I'll explain it, but this is a depiction from ancient Kemet. That's what was called the land of the black people, what we now know as Egypt, right? So this was an alternative method. Instead of waiting for their morals to kick in, Ma'at has to do with truth, justice, righteousness, propriety, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity. I want us to focus in on this justice and focus in on this reciprocity, right? Justice means, do we have any idea what justice is? If you don't know what it looks like, I'll show you some pictures so you can see what justice looks like. If you don't know what reciprocity is, I'll show you some pictures so you can see what reciprocity looks like. But this is the oldest system of law in the entire world, called Ma'at. And it was depicted as a black woman, as you see here. This is how it's written in the ancient language. So what we're going to get straight into are the enslaved Africans who abolished slavery. This is a text that you can look up and you can read at your leisure. But if you want to know what this justice looked like to the African people who were being enslaved, I'll show you an image. If you want to know what reciprocity looked like to those African people, I'll show you an image. That Ma'at looked a bit like this to the Africans in Haiti. This may be shocking to some of you, but for African people who are looking for emancipation,
Free black nation.
emancipation,
Free African nation.
emancipation,
Free black nation.
emancipation,
Free African nation.
to those Africans it looked a lot like justice. And these are images that Europeans did. Now you don't see morality in here, you see fear in these depictions. This is another depiction of the great leader, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, right? And here you see him holding the head of something that looks like a cow. Is it a pig? No. That is someone who tried to enslave his people, right? And this is what justice looked like to Dessalines. Now, many of us have heard the name Napoleon, but many of us may not have heard the name Dessalines. This is the African who defeated Napoleon, that at that time was regarded to be the strongest military in the world. This was one of the many Africans, along with Toussaint Louverture, along with Christophe, who was able to defeat Napoleon and the British and so many others many times over. This is what the Europeans were afraid of. These are the Africans, and this is Boukman, the leader in Haiti, who said, throw away the image of the white man's God and listen to liberty which speaks in all of our hearts, right? And this is Africans of all types of ethnic groups coming together around a common cause of emancipation,
Free black nation.
emancipation,
Free African nation.
emancipation,
Free black nation.
emancipation.
Free African nation.
Very good. These are images of what caused abolition to happen, right? And we're going to go to various places throughout North America, South America, Central America. And this was looking like Ma'at to those Africans, right? Now this is Haiti, and this is the founder of the oldest civilization in the history of the planet, called Kemet, or Egypt. And you see something similar here, right? Grabbing this hair and smiting the enemy. And this is what we found here. So this is an ancient tradition. So if you ever have anyone who tries to enslave you, you know how to take care of that problem. This is the methodology, the correct methodology of emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
If you don't know what justice looks like, this is what it looked like to the Europeans, right? Revolt General des Nègres, Massacre des Blancs. A revolt of these Africans and a massacre of these whites. Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation?
Free African nation.
Emancipation?
Free black
That brother looks like he wants some emancipation. And they look like they're not too happy about emancipation. I think they may be on the wrong side of history. But us, we're going to be on the right side. So I just want to give you the names so you can, at your own leisure, go back and follow up on some of these names. So 1526, sometimes we have this image of the docile enslaved African who's just sitting around twiddling his thumbs, doing Kambon. Yeah, I'm happy. But from the very beginning, 1526, right? This is before there was anything called America, before there was any of these things. That 1526 Spanish Florida, they were victorious in a rebellion, a revolution, restoring Ma'at. Remember? Justice, truth, reciprocity, right? That's 1526. 1570 in Veracruz, New Spain, that's modern day Mexico. Gaspar Yanga. Have we heard that name before? Gaspar Yanga. Has anyone here ever heard of Julius Caesar? This is a test to let us know we need to know something more about ourselves and perhaps a little bit less focus on those who did not want our emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
So a great African, you can find his statues in Mexico to this day. 1712, the New York Slave Revolt. 1730, the first Maroon War in a place that may be familiar to some of you, what was called British Jamaica, and they were victorious here, right? But they didn't stop there. 1733, St. John. 1739, the Stono Rebellion. And I would like to go into this, but I'll just have time to give you the names of some of these. At your leisure, you can follow up on any of these that sound interesting. 1741, the New York Conspiracy. 1760, again in where?
Jamaica.
Jamaica, right? Taki's War. Now we hear this Taki, right? And it's a name that we can still hear in various forms. The Kambon, you can hear Teji amongst the Afrikans. This is someone who was coming from right here. And oftentimes people see me, they see these locks, they say, oh, you must be from Jamaica. And it reminds me of cocoa. Why? Because cocoa comes from right here. They take it somewhere, bring it back to you, and you don't recognize it. They call it chocolate then, right? Here is something that comes from here. You can find it carved in the walls of the pyramids. But all of a sudden, Bob Marley came out, we forgot the last 10,000 years. I ain't mad at you. All right, other uprisings, rebellions, uprisings, revolutions. 1791, the Mina Conspiracy. When you talk about Mina, again, they're talking about right here in what we now call Ghana. Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation!
Free African nation.
Emancipation!
Free black nation.
Very good. All right, 1795, the Point Coupe Conspiracy in Louisiana. 1791 to 1804, Haitian Revolution victorious. This is a biggie. And this is the granddaddy of others that came later. And one of the main causes of abolition and emancipation. In 1800, Gabriel Prosser. 1803, Igbo landing. 1805, Chatham Manor. This isn't all of them. This isn't all. Your African ancestors wanted what? Emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
Right? 1811, German Coast. 1815, George Boxley. 1816, Busa's Rebellion. 1822, Denmark Vesey. 1831, Nat Turner. 1831 to 32, Baptist War. 1839, Amistad, you may have heard of that one. 1841, Creole Case. 1842, Slave Revolt of Cherokee Nation. Now these people who we call the Native Americans, they also enslaved African people, right? And we had to have a rebellion against them too, right? 1842, so a lot of you try to perm your hair and say, oh, I have Indian in my family, I don't know, right? You may. But you need to know about some of these things that were going on. 1859, John Brown. So the 1811 German Coast one, this is called one of the most successful and largest ones because it brought about emancipation.
Free black nation.
200 to 500 enslaved Africans participated, and they started burning up these plantations because they wanted emancipation. So if you want to burn a plantation, that means you want emancipation.
Free black nation.
Berbice uprising, right? 1762, you had 3,833 enslaved blacks, and you only had 346 whites. By the end of this, half of that white population that had lived in the colony remained. That's because those Africans were getting them some what? Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation?
Free African.
They didn't wait for some morality and conscience to take hold. They said, I'm going to take hold of that hair. Bam, emancipation. The Bayana Wars in Panama. We don't hear about these Africans who were causing their own emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African.
We hear about Lord Mansfield decided that, oh, this is a bad thing we're doing. And he also decided we're getting our butts whooped by these Africans who want emancipation.
Free black nation.
So we better do something about that. Curaçao, right? So here it was eventually subdued, but was led by an African named Tula, right? A month-long conflict there on the island, right? That's 1795, and this is a monument to those Africans and Tula who led it. The Creole case, they were on board of the ship Creole, and here you had Africans who said, you know what, we're going to go over to Nassau in the Bahamas, and it's called the most successful slave revolt in U.S. history. I'll give you another example, one that was even more successful, that we oftentimes don't think about. Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
Caught you. Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Very good. You had other ones, the Demerara Rebellion 1823. 10,000 enslaved Africans. Now, you can't get 10,000 Africans together now for anything except for a conference or a concert or something like that. But here, they were coming here for what? Emancipation?
Free black nation.
And it was led by an African named Kwame Nkrumah. Where do you think he came from?
Oh, yeah.
Right here where we're standing. Right? So here you had emancipation. You had other rebellions in the West Indies. Here you had 1793 when Britain was at war with France and invaded the French territory of Saint Domingue. The British Army wanted to seize this lucrative colony for itself and suppress the vast slave uprising taking place there before it could spread to the nearby British colony of Jamaica. So here again we find a reason why they were trying to go into Haiti, because they said if this spreads, we're in some deep trouble. Because these Africans want what? Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation!
Free African nation.
Emancipation!
Free black nation.
Emancipation!
Free African nation.
Other examples. So the army failed. Here you have the British Army, which was said to be the baddest army in the whole world, right? And they were coming here to suppress these Africans in what would become Haiti. However, they went in there and they got their butts spanked by Africans who wanted what? Emancipation?
Free black nation.
So they were very clear on the method that Africans were using to get their own emancipation. They weren't waiting for abolition. So the army fell 5 years and more than 12,000 British deaths later. 12,000, right? So if you want to know why they decided to go ahead and do abolition, you can see very clearly the reason why. So the army fell 5 years and more than 12,000 British dead later. You had them going right back out where they came from. So an army of rebel enslaved Africans had defeated the army of the world's superpower and largest slave trading nation. The humiliation of this defeat sent a shockwave through the British establishment and indirectly strengthened the forces in Parliament that voted to abolish the slave trade in 1807. So if you thought that they just were going to have their conscience tell them something, no, they had something else that was telling them something.
I need to have control. Go stop.
We continue.
And I think so. I'm going to come back to square one, round two.
Right? New uprisings shook the British Caribbean in later years. The greatest of them erupted where? Jamaica. At the end of 1831, more than 20,000 captives seized control of much of the northwest corner of the island, setting planters' houses on fire. Many of these were on ridges or hilltops, and as they burst into flames, they acted like beacons to spread the revolt. So other Africans saw this light, and they said, you know what? I think there's something going on here related to emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
Right? It took the British Army and militia a month to get the country under control. Some 200 enslaved Africans and 14 white people died in the fighting. At least 340 more slave rebels were hanged or shot afterwards. Right? So what you find here is you had some serious emancipation going on. All right? So we continue. Because I want us to be clear on what actually caused emancipation. You had other rebellions. In Britain, news of the revolt almost certainly hastened the coming of emancipation. Both private correspondence and testimony before Parliament showed that colonial officials and high-ranking military men expected more revolts. Fear, not conscience and morality, right? They expected more revolts and feared that the British military might not be able to contain them because they didn't contain them the last time, or the time before that, or the time before that, because these Africans wanted emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
It was no coincidence that a new parliament voted to free the slaves the following year, right? So you thought that, oh, they heard the violins drumming and said, oh, look at how bad we're treating these Africans. No, within a year, they said, we're getting our behinds whooped. We better come up with something else. And this takes us to the grudge against Haiti. So you hear the name Thomas Jefferson. Has anyone ever heard that name before? I hope you've also heard Dessalines. So you have the case where Jefferson refused to recognize Haitian independence, a policy to which U.S. Federalists also acquiesced. Although France recognized Haitian independence in 1825, Haitians would have to wait until 1862 for the United States to recognize Haiti's status. It is because they were fearing that the Haitian Revolution would spread to the United States, right? So it's not morality that's causing abolition to take place. It's abject fear of what? Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation!
Free African nation.
Let's get some more participation for our emancipation.
Free black nation.
Very good. And Haiti was enduring inspiration. You had the Malay revolt in Brazil, far off Brazil. So on a Sunday during Ramadan in January 1835, in the city of Salvador da Bahia, a group of enslaved African people, they started a rebellion looking to restore Ma'at. Remember, justice, reciprocity, and they knew about the Haitian Revolution, and they wore necklaces bearing the image of President Dessalines, who had declared Haitian independence, right? So everybody in the world knew what was going on, right? In Britain, they knew they were getting their butts whooped. In Brazil, they were inspired by the Africans who were doing the butt whooping. But one of the most direct causes came from where? Jamaica. This rock here, this Jamrock that we see up here. So there had been a number of rebellions by enslaved Africans on the island of Jamaica. 16 slave rebellions had taken place between 1655 and 1813. So that just blows away the idea that we're just sitting here laying back waiting for some morality, right? There were also major uprisings in 1816, 1823. So all of these are very close to the dates where we're talking about. They said, you know what, we better stop doing the trade. Oh, you know what, we better just abolish it altogether. Oh, you know what? These are reactions to what your African ancestors were doing. Direct reactions within a week. We'll see this. So 1831 saw the largest uprising. It started with the enslaved people refusing to work. The strike was meant to be peaceful with the aim of forcing the owners to pay the enslaved people to cut the cane so it would not spoil. Things soon escalated. Enslaved Africans burnt down houses and warehouses full of sugar cane, causing over £1 million worth of damage. That's £1 million in currency at that time. More than 200 plantations in the north of Jamaica were attacked as 20,000 enslaved people seized control of large chunks of land. Now that is what justice looks like. That is what emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
Emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
That's what that looks like. So the rebellion continued. The rebels were led by Samuel Sharp. Remember that name, right? This is a name that was so sharp, it struck fear all the way in Britain, and we'll see this. So the main rebellion lasted 10 days, but it took British troops the whole of January 1832. We're close to a very significant date that we talked about, right? This Abolition Act, right? We shouldn't call it an act, we should call it a react, right? So it resulted in the death of nearly 200 Africans, 14 British planters or overseers. However, the repercussions of the rebellion were more terrible. Hundreds of the rebels were captured and over 750 were convicted, of which 138 were sentenced to death. Some were hanged, others were shot by firing squad. Most of those who escaped the death sentence were brutally punished, sometimes so harshly that they died anyway. Sharp was executed in public. The revolt was very important and helped to end what? Very good. Not an act, a react. It also shocked the British government and made them see that the costs and dangers, right, of keeping slavery in the West Indies were too high. It reminded many of the Saint Domingue, that's Haiti, rebellion, right? Everybody in the world was reading newspapers. Everybody in the world knew what was going on. If this happens on this island, you're going to feel it halfway across the globe. So there were fears of another major rebellion on Jamaica, and many terrified plantation owners were now ready to accept what? Abolition, right? Rather than risk a widespread war, because they realized that, you know what, if we don't stop this particular form of enslavement, Haiti is going to be everywhere. There's going to be Haiti in the United States. There's going to be Haiti in the Bahamas. There's going to be Haiti in the UK. There's going to be Haiti in France. The entire world is going to be one big Haiti, right? And if you see the state Haiti is in, it's because Europeans still have a grudge against Haiti. These are our brothers and sisters, right? So just 1 week after Sharp's death, Parliament appointed a committee to consider ways of ending slavery. So we shouldn't call it an act that abolished enslavement, a react to your ancestors' act. And what did that act look like? It looked like this. That's the act. And that's an act that looks like what? Emancipation?
Free black nation.
Emancipation?
Free African nation.
Emancipation?
Free black nation. Free African nation.
Very good. And what some call the greatest rebellion in modern history is the Africans who ended slavery in the Civil War, right? We don't think about this. There were over 200,000 Africans who whooped the crap out of these white folks in the South, right? This is a major rebellion. So by the time the war ended in 1865, about 180,000 black men had served as soldiers in the U.S. Army. About 10% of the total, about 90,000 were former or contraband enslaved Africans from the Confederate States. So 40,000 died during the war, 10,000 in battle, 30,000 from illness or infection. So when they talk about, oh, Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, he freed, thank you, Abraham. No, these were the Africans who freed themselves, right? By going to war and doing some emancipation.
Free black nation.
Emancipation.
Free African nation.
Very good. So conclusions. I think we're now clear on emancipation. So one of the conclusions is Haiti was an ever-looming and imminent threat of the U.S. becoming another Haiti. It stirred all pale Eurasians to cut their losses and forced them to transform chattel enslavement into all the insidious forms of enslavement that exist under other names now, most notably imprisonment, right? So what we did is we emancipated ourselves in the sense that we forced them to transform it into you have to do something else, right? Also note that in the United States to date, enslavement has never been abolished per constitutional amendment. So they often talk about, oh, the 13th Amendment, that ended slavery. People who say that have never actually read the amendment. Now the amendment says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Now they made sure to keep this caveat in there, right? Because that means that slavery can exist as long as I say you committed a crime. Do you have any evidence of a job? You're loitering. Go work and lay some railroad tracks for me for free, right? They call it convict leasing. Look it up. Check it out, right? Now they call it the prison industrial complex, where you don't even have to do anything. All that has to happen is some white person says that you did something. If you're standing on the corner, stop and frisk. Right? So, you are liable to be enslaved at any moment on the whim of a white person saying you committed a crime as long as you are there in the U.S. Keep in mind that the whims of white people are quite whimsical. Right? Also, a side effect of this is the criminalization and the modern day lynching with impunity by police paddy rollers, patrollers, and basically any white with a gun, right? So we hear about black people being shot up in the US. That's a side effect of this amendment that says we can still enslave you only if you're a criminal. Well, the side effect is, well, all black people, we're gonna say all of y'all are criminals. So as soon as I see you, I thought you had a gun, pow. Uh-oh, put down that 38 caliber wallet you got on, right? So we have to understand these things in their historical context. And you can also read about the continued enslavement in an article that I wrote called The Legacies and the Impact of Transatlantic Enslavement on the Diaspora. So if you're interested in how slavery never ended, that it went from chattel enslavement to convict leasing to sharecropping, right? And then right on to privatized prisons to this day. And right now you have more black people in prison than you had in the border slave states at the end of the Civil War in 1865. More enslavement now working for free to this day than you had in 1865 in those border states. So I'll close with that. I hope everyone learned something about emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
Emancipation.
Free African Nation.
Emancipation.
Free Black Nation.
Who wants some emancipation?
Free African Nation.
I'm glad to hear that you want some of that. Mesdames, Mademoiselles, il y a eu un don, après, non,